is an ugly case. I'm asking for forgiveness now because you don't know I hate you when I bring this up. That's what I look like, oh, we're getting to it. This is Giovanni Ochoa. This is a little boy that was starved to death by his grandmother in 2004. And the reason I bring this up during a human trafficking conference is when we're talking about working together, this little boy was starved to death in a house and had the Sheriff's Office in San Antonio and Child Protective Services been working together, just communicating together, this would have never happened. It would have never happened. This is a house that we received calls to, and patrolmen that weren't appropriately trained or didn't have enough information to go into the house to carry out stuff. They wouldn't answer the door. He didn't have enough probable cause to break the door. Neighbors would call saying, "Little kid next door looks like he's starved to death." Child Protective Services, this family was what we call a regular customer. Most CPS stuff is civil, so they get served. To avoid being served, they move. They move to another place, they move to another place. The bottom line, mom was leaving her kids at her grandma's house every weekend while she was going out partying. She was a young mommy. Because of her lifestyle, the family bullied her and told her that, hey, we're just going to keep the kids here. But deep down inside, grandmother assumed that Giovanni was a bastard child in her mind because we knew the family, because of the Mexican mafia and a lot of drug stuff we done, he was murdered. And she knew that this child couldn't have been born at the right time because he was deceased. So in her mind, he was a bastard child and deserved what happened to him. Giovanni Ochoa was starved over about a period of 7 months. He was fed occasionally. There were some medical problems he had. But any normal kid, any normal parent would have done something right. And the reason I'm talking to you about this case was so compelling, we changed the entire state of Texas Child Protective Services. They eliminated positions. They created several hundred investigator positions, mandated law enforcement experience, and the best thing that came out of that update law was it mandated that law enforcement and CPS work together side by side, child abuse, child neglect, child sexual abuse cases. This is a dream for a lot of us that used to work when people weren't working together. We have child advocacy centers. There's 63 of them in Texas that are multidisciplinary teams that have social service providers, counselors, prosecutors, and law enforcement all sitting at the same table talking about what? What's best for the victim. Before we had these child advocacy centers, this collaborative agreement, it used to take sometimes 2 or 3 years to get an indictment because everybody was not on the same page. There was power struggles. There was a lot of new dynamics coming out that hadn't been gone through all the appeal systems. Today, we can walk in and we can, what used to take 2 or 3 years just to get an indictment, and then the defense lawyers would try to drag it out, the kids would age out, and sometimes we didn't get a prosecution. Now, in 3 to 6 months, we got an indictment, and we're working on a plea bargain. So that's a huge success. Well, Giovanni Ochoa was tied to this bed, was starved to death, while Child Protective Services was making calls to the house. Had the Sheriff's Office had the information that CPS had, we could have gotten probable cause to go in the house and prevent it. Had CPS known that we were getting calls, they could have gotten some civil orders to go in the house and recover the child. But since we weren't communicating, this is embarrassing. What happened was Giovanni Ochoa basically was tortured. He was tied to the bed, the marks on the bed. We learned from Dr. Kellogg that children that starve tend to gnaw on things. And what happened was Giovanni Ochoa was deceased. This is a case that a friend of mine that went to the hospital to view the body while we were trying to figure out what was going on in the house. This is a 30-year veteran that does murders, and he could not talk. It's pretty choked up. It's an ugly, ugly case. Well, another thing that we learned was every time you deal with these types of families, that all their stories are in order. Anybody who's ever worked in law enforcement knows that everybody's stories are not going to be perfectly consistent. Well, we talked to the little kids and found out that Giovanni was tortured, the mark on his nose is from duct tape being ripped off. I'm not going to go into elaborate detail, but you can imagine. The boy just extremely suffered because we were not working together.